I'm getting sick of you, actually. What's good people? I'm OBO, and in case you didn't know, I'm the G in LGBTQ, and you're watching It's Just Not Adding Up. So get in here and act like you got some sense. We're about to create some space. Did someone tell you you were an ally, or did you come into allyship on your own?
Someone told me I was an ally, but it allowed me to come into allyship on my own because they told me I was an ally based off of who I was as a person. And just showing up as a regular human being allowed me to be, but it also allowed them to be. And that allowed for us to create a connection. And then they said, oh, you're an ally. I never looked at it that way.
Yeah.
I looked at it, I want to see you for who you are. I want you to see me for who I am. And let's find a connection on that particular point.
I think for a lot of us, we get comfortable in our privileges, whatever that may look like, whether it's straight privilege, whether it's being able-bodied, all the things, right? And so I think sometimes when we're in our privilege, we fear groups that don't have the same privileges or advantages that we have. Was there ever any of that for you?
No. Because I think, so my cousin put this in the terms for me that allowed me to understand it. When I started, I talk about mental health a lot. And me just actually discussing being diagnosed bipolar disorder and attempting suicide and all of these particular things, when I was able to share with the world from that standpoint about those particular things that I hid for 7 years, my cousin put it to the same terms as someone, hiding their identity when it comes down to being identifying as gay or identifying as queer or any other
for sure
label.
For sure.
It gave me an aha moment, like, we're all trying to hide something from some people.
Don't come here starting stuff. But that's so real because I think a lot of people get lost on the ways in which they actually can identify with somebody else.
Right.
You don't have to necessarily be gay to identify with me. You know what it's like to suppress stuff in some way.
Right. And so my cousin sent me a text message one day. He was like, to see your vulnerability and your power to share with the world who you are, I want to share with you who I am.
Yee!
And like, it fucked me up.
I would imagine. That's a lot.
Yes.
Because there's power in giving people space, no plug intended, in giving people space to be their authentic self.
Right.
And I don't necessarily have to see me in you to feel comfortable being my authentic self. What I need to see in you is authenticity.
Right. And that's going to allow us to find ways to connect. That's going to find ways for us to respect one another. We can disagree,
for sure,
but I don't have to disrespect you. But I also go into it with the lens of I want to learn from you.
Have you received any pushback from the LGBTQ community or anybody else?
No, I haven't. No pushback, not directly to my face. But then honestly, because I approach it from a genuine standpoint, if you got any pushback for me, I'm gonna still do what I do.
Period.
I know what my intention is.
Yeah. I get it. I think a lot of people on both sides of the coin have a little bit of anxiety or are a little jaded as it relates to separate communities meeting in the middle.
Right.
There's this question of, can people truly be an ally for a community that they don't fully understand? Because I think a lot of us need understanding to pass over kindness, pass over respect, and it's unnecessary.
Right.
I don't have to understand you.
You're human.
But that's so real.
That's it.
And I think people, because even for myself, I talk about attraction a lot with my cishet friends because I think for a lot of, especially in the Black community, when it comes to men have not been taught what attraction truly is. And so I think there's a lot of confusion around intimacy and attraction and the things. And I asked you off camera, like, has your allyship made you question your own, orientation of your own self?
Right.
Because people assume that their proximity to a thing almost makes them that thing.
To answer that particular question, it made me learn more about myself and be open to learning more about myself and understanding the spectrum that comes along with anything. So I always relate it to mental health. Mental health is on a spectrum. Some days I'm good, some days I'm not so good. It depends on the environment that I'm in. It depends on, my biological being at that particular moment.
Yeah.
It depends on what my spirit is feeling at that particular moment, my energy that I'm getting. all of those particular things. It's the same thing with whether it be with sexuality, it's a spectrum.
I think we're afraid of that spectrum, though.
Because of the fact that society tells us that we got to be in this one particular box. I broke that box when I told people that I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but I can still be a therapist. I can still be a business owner. I can still be a good friend. I can still thrive.
Don't come here preaching. Don't come here preaching, because I'm shot right now. Don't come here preaching. Don't you come here preaching.
We had done started that earlier.
But that's so real. Because I think a lot of us are in this rapid race from stigma.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get away from it by any means necessary. And
Right.
if there's a spectrum, that means that I have the possibility to interact with stigma, and I'm not going for it.
Right. Stigma or discrimination.
Yes.
And especially in groups that you want to be a part of.
Yes.
No, we both are in fraternities. And we understand the bullshit that comes along with that.
Mm-hmm.
There's some great things. There's a lot of great things, but
Yeah.
we understand the dynamic of what is to mean to be a cisgender male in those particular fraternities and how you're supposed to portray and all of those particular things. I push back even on my chapter bros when we're talking about something. I'm like, yo, hold up. That ain't what you need to be saying. Like you sound real 19th century right now.
Is that exhausting?
At times it can be.
Mm-hmm.
Not even gonna lie. But I still find it my place to still speak up in certain instances, because if I'm not gonna speak up in this group where there's nobody else there, you can't consider yourself an ally.
I think that's where your privilege truly shines. I sometimes feel like, and this is super left field, guys, don't make this a moment, but but you know those people who pass for white, and so they're in those white spaces, so they hear people saying the N-word, they hear people saying the things, and with that hard ER. And
Right.
For me, because sometimes I think people assume that I'm straight, I'm in spaces where I'm like, wait a minute. You know,
Right.
They think they're in comfortable spaces.
Right.
And it's a little exhausting, if I'm being frank. Even
Yeah.
amongst fraternity brothers, it
Yeah.
can be exhausting where
Yeah.
I'm, hey, dude, you can't say that.
Right.
Hey, dude, that's not cool.
Right. It's
Even
not.
amongst family, like setting those family boundaries has been very tough. Because I think in the same breath, we've made the bar very low, even for allyship.
Yeah, agreed.
You know, because historically we've been beaten, we've been, killed, trans women are dying, all these things are happening. And so for us, the mere fact that you didn't beat me up, I'm grateful. Right. And so that's not
allyship.
It's really not, though, but because they didn't, a lot of people feel this sense of empowerment, like I'm for the community. I didn't beat them up, or I let you come in, you can't stay. I let you come in the room. And no, Brandon said this. Did Brandon send me this? Years ago. Oh, I'm gonna mess it up. Sorry, B. But he said, dang, what did he say? It was something along the lines of, they were comparing acceptance and tolerance. And tolerance is inviting you to the party, and acceptance is asking you to dance. And a lot of people are uncomfortable asking people to dance. And I think that's what needs to happen to include everyone. Because honestly, if we're being really, really frank, allyship, inclusion is a very simple thing.
Very.
We've made it this convoluted, complex idea, but it's a very simple thing.
Very.
And I think these conversations are necessary, don't get me wrong, but it's interesting that we're having a conversation about including people, respecting people, loving people.
For who they are, and just as a human being. I can come to you and say, oh, I love you, brother.
Facts.
Give you a hug.
Facts.
Kiss you on your forehead, whatever. Like, seriously though, that doesn't change who I am.
At all.
And I really don't give a fuck what anybody else says, because I know who I am and I know the relationship that I have with you.
But I think there's a certain amount of confidence, a certain amount of self-work, something that has to happen to get to that.
Oh, agree.
Even for me, my Line Brothers relationship changed so much. I doubt y'all are watching, but if y'all are, just don't be mushy. Don't be mushy. But in this moment, I was dating a guy, and we were talking about, I think I just got out of a relationship with a guy, matter of fact, and we're talking about sex. Mind you, I'm dealing with two cishet men.
Right.
We're talking about sex, and I'm going to bleep some of this out, but we were talking about sex, and I was talking about how I like when my partner had did this thing.
Right.
And my LB was like, oh, I love when they do that. I love when my girl do that. But my mom like, am I having a conversation about sex with two straight men? But it was like it really like even further solidified that we're not all that different. Like, I'm like, me too. What they be doing? what? And we're going up, and he's talking about a woman, I'm talking about a man, and it's not that deep.
Right, it's really not that deep.
But that blew my mind, because I'm like, I literally was driving home like, wait, did we just have a conversation that I think we just had? What were we talking about? But it further solidified that we are not that different.
No, we're not.
But I think, again, there's a certain amount of confidence, there's a certain amount of self-awareness, and there's a certain amount of not running from self.
Right.
I think a lot of us are you made a point earlier about our proximity to the things that we want or to who we want to be in the world. And I think a lot of us, even for myself, when you're younger and having desires, you look at the world differently when you understand you have to sit somewhere.
Right.
When you're young, you don't think you have to sit anywhere. You're just who you are. You move through life, how you move through life. Who cares? You don't
Right.
think about where you're going to end up. But when you get older, you're like, wait a minute, I want to end up with a job. I want to end up around people who matter. I want to end up with the things. And you understand what I need to do to myself to get there. So now we get to the point where we're contouring who we are. Okay, well, if I'm strong, then I get this amount of privilege or access. And if I come off straight, I get this amount of privilege or access. If I look a certain way, if my hair is cut a certain, like now you have to think about the weeds, and it deters you often, not always, but from who you were.
Right.
But allyship, advocacy, these communities of people who are committed to making sure that not even just queer people, but everybody feels like they can be themselves. Because honestly, the work that a lot of queer advocates do is for everybody.
It is. It really is.
Because if you're not well, I can't be well.
That part. That's why I equate it to the work that I do in the mental health space. It's about acceptance. It's about understanding where people are on whatever spectrum we're looking at. Whatever spectrum.
How do you go about asking questions? Do you have a community of people that you just have built a rapport with? Do you kind of, is it heavy? Is it lighthearted? Like when you want to know something or when you don't know something, or a way in which you can show up for someone, and maybe not even you specifically, but if someone is trying to figure out how can I show up for somebody? How can I ask the questions I don't know? What would you suggest?
For me, it's about doing my own research. We got Google, bro. Like sometimes it's really not that hard to start Googling your own self. But then also, if I have people that I'm great friends with that are like family that I can just have just general conversations with. And similar, like you said, when you're having talks with your LBs and stuff, we talk about everything all the time. And he could be talking about a man, I could be talking about a woman. He'll be, oh, I'm gonna send you this toy that you need to go get because it's a good toy, whatever.
Right.
He was like, you need to try this joint out. I'm open to it, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yes.
All right, we just have these conversations. We have conversations just like we're people. But then also, I'm running stuff by him. I'm like, I want to make sure that I'm not being insensitive to certain things, or I want your perspective on these particular. If you have the space to give me that, because a lot of times, just because we're close friends and you identify as a certain thing, I can't expect you to give me all of the information all of the time, because sometimes you're just tired,
and sometimes you don't know.
That part.
I think being in the community, people understand or think that you understand every aspect of a thing. And
right,
come on now,
right,
like come on now.
Just like all Black people are not monolithic.
Facts.
It's any other community.
Facts.
It's not monolithic.
And I think being open to receiving, because I know I saw your story once, and you were talking about saying died by suicide or something else, and I was like, I never even thought about those places. But being open to employing language, I think people get so exhausted. Fake exhausted in my opinion, but like, well, I'm sick of, I don't want to know your pronouns, I don't want, and it's not that hard to me to respect somebody's space.
Well, somebody was like, oh, they didn't want to use the pronouns they and this, that, and the third. I was like, think about it from the aspect of, back in the day, it was like when you run in the streets and stuff, and you didn't want to let somebody know that you were with a girl or something that you ain't supposed to be with. You'd be like, oh, they.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Right.
So you can, but it's really not that hard.
I guess for me, I truly to this day don't really understand the beef with me. With calling somebody what they want to be called. I don't know. Maybe I have too much. I'm too in the space. I don't know. But to me, it just sounds like asinine, to be honest, that I have any feelings at all about what you choose to be called or how you choose to identify. Right. That literally does not affect me. Like, not even being funny, it just does not affect me. I don't even know how that would even make me uncomfortable.
As a therapist, and as someone that works with so many different stories from different people, a lot of times what I realize is the stuff that makes people uncomfortable is because they identify with it, but they're afraid to really address that within themselves.
I'm getting sick of you, actually. Because that's real on a grand scale and a small scale.
Yes.
Even for myself, there's things that I am afraid to address. And when I see them in real time, it makes me uncomfortable.
Yep.
Because I ain't there yet.
Right.
And I think a lot of people, and this isn't even like a, everybody was homophobic as DL. This is right?
Yeah, no, it's not that at all.
It's not that. It's just, I think there is a little space where there's some whatever in you, and you don't know how to address that whatever that's in you.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes you uncomfortable with people who are doing that in excess.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's kind of like when you don't have any money, right? And you know that you have enough to pay your bills, but you kind of need some.
Right.
But the person's rich in front of you, and it makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable because it's reminding you of the thing that you haven't addressed.
Right.
And I think that's what happens in a lot of people's scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so last question. So if someone wants to be an ally, like not ally for, but wants to also they feel like, I want to create some more space for people. I want to, get rid of some of the dogma that I've heard, some of the homophobia, transphobia, some of the things that I've heard growing up, because I think for a lot of our stories, especially in the Black community, we've heard language that has suppressed us further.
Right.
And for LGBTQ community and people outside of the community, right? Whether you didn't want to be it or didn't want to be close to it.
Right.
So how would you advise somebody to kind of let go? They say some things in their spirit that's not necessarily the best or the most inclusive. How would you advise them to let some of that stuff go? Heavy question.
That's a loaded question. One of the things is learn yourself.
Mm.
Be honest with yourself. Because of the fact of outside of whatever society says you should be or shouldn't be, you still got to live with yourself. And if you're unhappy with yourself, you go project that onto everyone else around you. Also, just understanding that being an ally for me is a verb, not a noun. I got to show up. I got to do these particular things. But then also that as I learned myself, I learned what the things that I like, the things that I don't like, but then also understand that there's a constant evolution. And as you evolve, you understand that I respect your evolution as well. I also want to promote your evolution. And how can I support you in that particular evolution? That's the part that goes beyond whatever identity it is.
That's it. That's it.
I bring the human into humanity.
I'm just sitting here at this point.
I mean, but that's what it is. Period.
Keep creating space. I'll see y'all next Peace. Dude, so good.